Hey everybody, you are tuned in to Hanging with Here to Zen, the show that is a place for people who love all kinds of music. We really hope you enjoy your time with us today. Make sure you hit subscribe if you already haven't, and hit that notification bell to be kept up to date. We would love to hear from you over on our social media platforms, so just search Here to Zen and you'll find us. Lastly, could you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or Google Podcasts, or wherever you're going to be tuning in from? Those reviews help other people to find us, so we appreciate the reviews and the support. Thanks so much for tuning in. All right, so selling 5 million albums, massive deal for any band, let alone when it's their debut album. Add 2 number one singles to the mix, worldwide tours. The Black Crowes are back in Australia in 2 weeks, celebrating the 30th anniversary of their album. I've got the guitar player from the band, Rich Robinson, joining us. How are you today, mate?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm great. Like I said, 5 million albums, 2 number one singles. It's really not something a lot of bands expect in their career, in their wildest dreams, but let alone their debut album. Can you cast your mind back to that, going from Mr. Crow's Garden into the Black Crowes, into recording the album, what your expectations would have been all that time ago?
I had no expectations. I mean, I was 19 when we made the record, so I was just a kid. And the way we saw it, we were playing really unfashionable music. Like no
Yep.
one at the time was looking backwards at what we chose our creative expression to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it really came from a far more indie, uh, independent and alternative mindset. Growing up in Atlanta, you had a lot of the southern, quote unquote, southern rock bands like Skinnerd and the Outlaws and all those bands. And all of those bands they didn't really resonate with us. We were more into like our first bands, and the first things we were listening to was like punk rock and, the Dead Kennedys and X and the Ramones and all of these different bands, and that was really cool. And then this band that came out of Athens, Georgia, called REM, really just struck us. You know what I mean? It like hit us pretty hard. They were a Southern band. They had Southern accents. The way that they saw the world was in that way, but it was a more beautiful South. There was a different kind of approach to it, and we really resonated with that. And so we dove straight into that sort of mentality. We would go see REM every time they came to Atlanta. We would go see them, and the cool thing about them, which informed our. Hold on, I'm just going to close this door because it's a little loud.
Oh, good.
It informed our sort of worldview of how we chose to run our band. Like REM would play they're this alternative sort, more of like an art rock band, but they would play a Velvet Underground song, and then they'd play like Aerosmith's Toys in the Attic, or then they would play Big Star, and then they would play all these different things. And so it was real, and none of it seemed out of place.
Okay.
And so that kind of was really cool to us. And as we started getting older and our sound started out, like once we started a band, I mean, we were totally going for that jangly sort of pop, 60s pop music sort of thing, of what they were going for. But it morphed, and it started incorporating all of our influences, bands like the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin, but also blues music that we were into. The fate, from like, Muddy Waters to Furry Lewis to, Mississippi Fred McDowell. And I was always driven and drawn more towards the country blues, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. And so all of that soup kind of came to be where we made Shake Your Money Maker. The interesting thing about it, which is the interesting thing about rock and roll music in the day when it first came out, is what a broad spectrum of influences rock and roll music had.
Yep.
Joni Mitchell was rock and roll, as was, you know, Peter Green, as was the Rolling Stones, as was Dylan. To, you know, every um, you know, I don't know, I'm throwing out anyone, Buddy Guy, to, you know, anyone and everyone in between. It was a really welcoming sort of springboard of musical, you know, influences, and everyone was really unique, and the uniqueness was, it was what was celebrated, and that's what was kind of cool about it. So fast forward for those, you know, I started playing when I was 15, and then we made Shake Your Money Maker when I was 19. So fast forward 4 years, all of that process and all of that information that came through landed on Shake Your Money Maker. And, you know, being 19 years old and Chris was 21, I mean, we didn't have a ton of life experience, you know what
Yep.
I mean, to draw from. So we were wearing our influences pretty much on our sleeves, you know.
Yeah.
But it was, the cool thing about it was that it was really sincere and authentic. And we weren't living in New York or LA. And we weren't trying to be something we weren't. And we weren't trying to kind of fit in with a trend or trying to fit in with something that was popular at the time. We just made a record of music we loved, and that was it, you know?
Yeah. So in saying that about fitting in with trends, when Shake Your Money Maker came out, I was 16, so a little bit younger than you. And it came out right on the tail end of what everyone is going to call hair metal.
Right. Yeah.
And sort of right before when grunge was first starting to come in. So for me as the listener, there was this band that didn't fit into any MTV label. And I think
Yeah.
that's why, personally, for me and a lot of fans connected with you, because you just made your own lane. You didn't stay in anyone's lane. You made your own. Do you think that that is why that album and the band still is revered all this time later?
I mean, I think so. I mean, we've always been sort of an island unto ourselves, you know. We've never tried to write a popular record, never tried to write hit songs, because I would have no idea how to.
Yep.
And I didn't back then. They just kind of, I mean, I was 17 when I wrote She Talks to Angels. I don't know, you know, like what the fuck do I know at age 17?
Yep.
You know, that Chris and I wrote that song. So I'm not sure what that meant, but for whatever reason, it connected. But we took a left turn. Southern Harmony was kind of our stamp of like our first record that we sort of, in my opinion, walked into our own shoes
Mm-hmm.
and start hearing our own sounds. And then Amorica, we wanted to make, you know, and by the way, Southern Harmony, we made in 8 days. We went in and just recorded the whole thing live.
Wow.
You know, Amorica, we're like, we want to make a studio record. So we spent over a year making that record and trying to get the sound, you know, so we always experimented within our realm, and also in a natural way. I don't think anything was ever forced or pushed. And so we always, maybe to the detriment of our commercial success, you know, shot ourselves in the foot more for our artistic freedom and expression that we felt was a lot more important than like trying to fit some sort of trend, you know?
Yeah, sure. Now, going back 30 years, if you were to put the album on now, is there anything about it that you would tweak or change listening to it now?
I never look back and think of that, because that was the best record we could have made at the time.
Yep.
We were all thrilled with it. And based on our abilities and who we were and where we were coming from, you know, that was it. That was the pinnacle of what we could do, you know?
Yep.
And so I've never looked back at records and had regrets or thought like, oh, let's tweak this or tweak that, you know?
Perfect. Now, family dynamics, they're always difficult. Brothers, bands. There's been a few people that have sort of wondered why this is an original member tour. They can read it for themselves. But for you, the Black Crowes in 2022, is it just as much a band of brothers as it was when you started right now?
It's, you know, look, it when we started, everyone was in the band, everyone was really young. Family dynamics get drawn really quickly and really deep in the synaptic grooves of our brain. And every time you have a group of people, no matter what, from day one, those sort of patterns are instituted into how we behave with one another. Chris and I have the, you know, you could say curse or blessing of being brothers and having 19 more years of that before we started the band.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have 53 years of that as brothers.
Yeah.
So every year that we were split up, we got offered a tour and a lot of money and a lot of, you know, like, oh, this would be great, blah, blah, blah. And we always turned it down because we weren't ready. Then we finally reached a point where we were kind of ready and we talked to each other and we felt like the best way to do this to where it's not going to be just a one-off money grab sort of thing is to purge all the negative influences, all the people that were around us that were constantly trying to get in between us to further their own little agendas or their own, you know, little power trips. And so the best way to do that was just to start fresh, because Chris and I can be responsible for our own triggers, and we've really been vigilant to try not to go down the old patterns. You know, it's easy to get tired or grumpy and go down these patterns, but you know, we haven't done that, and I'm really happy that Chris and I are in this great place. I'm happy that Sven came on board because Sven's a stand-up dude and he's great too. And I've known Sven since I was 15 years old. And so, you know, the three of us that have sort of had this experience, and then all these other new guys that have brought a whole different energy and a whole different positive take on everything, a different amount of enthusiasm, has been really amazing. And it's great to see sort of the juxtaposition of the two, you know, to see like Chris, Finn, and I to get along and do all these things, and to have this sort of historical perspective of where we came from, what we did, and then also have these new guys who sees it, who sort of see the flow through, who are getting into the music, getting into our influences, and are really excited about that too. So both of those things have been pretty amazing. And so now, you know, look, we have this thing. We're really getting into the groove. It takes about 100 shows for a band to become a great band, and we've hit about 100 shows, you know.
Perfect. Now, the album was named after a song by Elmore James. Are you planning to maybe put that in as like an encore or anything like that throughout the run in Australia?
We haven't, because we have so many, so many other songs to play. Yep. You know, so we haven't done it. You know, I think the last time we played that song was when we toured with Jimmy. But yeah, we haven't played it in a long time. But we do come out to it.
Okay,
so,
great.
Jukebox. So we pay homage in our own way.
Excellent. Have the band started working on any new music for a future release?
We're talking about going into the studio early next year. I've written about 40 songs and I've sent them to Chris, and we've worked on, you know, maybe 25 of them so far. And yeah, we're working with George Drakoulias again. So
right. So I've got to ask, have you made any new guitar purchases recently?
Yeah. I the last guitar I bought, which was about a month ago, is a 1964 Rosa Morris Rickenbacker.
Lovely.
Which is pretty amazing.
What's your live rig going to be for the Australian tour?
I was fortunate enough, somehow, by some miracle, God knows how, I was like, man, I could really use a blues breaker, like a real one.
Yep.
And showed up. And it was in 1966. It was in Nashville. I bought it. And I was like, man, this thing's amazing. I wish I had another one as a backup. And then one showed up in Seattle, and it was a 68, and I bought it. And then I was like, well, you know, if you have two, you kind of have to have three, right?
Because,
yeah. You know, it just makes sense. And then another 68, or no, 69 showed up. and then I just bought a 67. So I have, and then I made a duplicate of one with new old stock. I mean, all original new old stock transistors, tubes, speakers, everything. So I have 5 of those that I tour with, and then I have these custom made Vox amps that I had that have all the good shit in them, and I use those 2, and I've been using my Silver Jubilee to run an amp beneath it too. So there's like 3 amps.
Perfect. We are limited on time. We're going to have to let you go. And have you got any final words 2 weeks out from seeing us all here in Australia?
Can't wait. You know, I mean, it's been a long time since we've been down there. So we're really excited. You know, can't wait to get down there.
Excellent, Rich. Thanks so much for joining us on Here to Zen today. I'll see you in Brisbane in under 2 weeks.
Cheers.
Thanks for your time, man. Have a great day.
See ya. Thanks.
Bye.